Well, g'day and welcome back to the shed, or in this case the back veranda. I've moved out of the shed, even though it's not a great day. It's a bit miserable and cloudy, but it could be worse. Other parts of the country are being flooded out, so I suppose I can't complain too much. Since the end of the last video, I've made a little bit of progress. If you watched the last one, you will realise that I had to refinish the whole top of the cabinet because of a problem with the paint. I've been doing a bit of rubbing back and polishing off camera, and it's starting to look pretty good, I'd have to say, but I haven't finished. I still got to do the sides of the cabinet. But the next thing to do with this is to fit some grill cloth. I can't really go any further until I do, because the grill cloth's fitted to the inside of the cabinet, not to the speaker baffle, just to make things a little bit more difficult. I ordered this grill cloth online when I first got the radio, and waited for it to arrive and put it away until I was ready to use it. When I pulled it out, this is it. I think it's way too yellow. It doesn't look very much like the photo online, and I guess that's the hazards of buying online, that the product sometimes doesn't look very much like what you thought you were buying. This is nice grill cloth, but I don't think the colour match will be right for this radio. So I went rummaging through the darker recesses of the shed and I found this stuff. Now this is similar style of cloth to the other one. In fact, if you look at them closely, they are the reverse of each other colour wise, and I had just enough of this left over to do this radio, so I think I'm going to go with this. I've cut a square of it that will fit a bit oversize, and it will fit either horizontally or vertically, and I have to make up my mind which way looks better. Having tried them both, I'm hedging towards horizontal. It would be very nice if I could find something closer to the original grill cloth, but I doubt if that's going to be possible now. Anyway, this stuff doesn't look too bad in it. It doesn't scream at it, so I'm going to go with this, I think. Okay, so this is my plan of attack. I've got a factory edge along the bottom here, which I can pretty much guarantee is straight, and I've cut a straight edge up the left. I've left it a bit oversized on the other two sides. So I'm going to initially staple it in this corner and glue it along the bottom and just see how much it will stretch. It has a small amount of stretch, probably a couple of millimeters over that length. So I want it tight. I don't want it to go floppy on me. That's the biggest drama with this. If you put it in and it goes floppy, it's really hard to fix. I could have pulled it in a little bit tighter, I think. It is pretty tight, but it seems to have a little more stretch in it than I thought. But to get the pattern level, I'll have to stretch it the same amount as I did initially on the bottom. Alright, so I think I'll stand the cabinet up now and we'll have a look at the front of it. And that looks pretty straight, I think. The vertical lines seem to line up. I'm seeing a bit of shadow here. That doesn't help. That's better. It lines up nicely horizontally, but that's the easy part. Okay, so I'll let that dry. I hope I've got it tight enough so that it doesn't sag. If not, it's going to be a job pulling it off. Well, that glue's had a little while to dry now. I did a trip to the hardware store, which is always a drama because they never have what you want, and you end up buying what you don't want and working out how you're going to make it fit. But more about that later. I'm just going to trim off the excess grill cloth now. I did end up undoing some of the staples and pulling it tighter, and managed to keep it lined up so it's not going to be crooked. And I'm pretty happy now that it's going to be tight enough. So the next thing is the speaker baffle, and if you watched, I think it was part 3 of this series, the speaker baffle isn't screwed to the cabinet as usual. It's got these thick felt pads which presumably stop it from vibrating, and it's held in place with these blocks here, which also have thick felt padding, and a similar pair of blocks at the bottom, which I had a difficult time taking out. And the baffle slides up and under these, just like that, and is held in place by them. But before I put that in, there's this cardboard panel which has to go in the top here, and it fits down and sits above the speaker baffle, something like that. The only thing is that the baffle board itself has this recess in the top of it, and I'm not sure whether that cardboard piece sits down flush with the top and so in front of these pieces here, or whether it just sits on top. If it sits on top, that will leave a gap, and I don't think that's the way it was. I'll have to go and watch my video of taking it out actually to find out how it went. Okay, so video seems to show it sitting right down against the baffle. So if I put this in here, it will have to go over the top of the cardboard piece, like that. Judging by the video, it was level with the ends of these pieces, so about there. Making sure I'm stapling into something that won't break. We can see where the staples were before, so that's a bit of a bonus. Okay, so the next thing is the bottom brackets to hold this baffle in. Now, when I was pulling these out, one of them came out with the nails still in it, and they're pressed in here and nailed in, and I think that was the left one, and the other one split a bit, and I've glued it back together, and I had planned to put screws in it, so that will fit in here underneath the baffle and hold it up like that. And the same with this one, except I can't really put it in there with the nails in it anyway, so I'll probably have to remove these nails, and I'll put screws in that as well. Now, to hold these in, I found these old wood screws. I've got a stash of them. They're a bit rusty, so I've cleaned them up and treated them with rust converter, and they at least will look original. I've run a drill through these, and the drill exited on the old nail hole, so that should be alright. If I can try and line them up, I will drill through them. Gee, light here is getting to be a bit of a nuisance. And the other one. Okay, so I have a couple of drill holes there which are more or less lined up with the original nail holes. One's a little bit off. So what I'm going to have to do now is to re-drill these, because the shank of those screws is about 4 millimeters, so that it doesn't split the wood, and then I'll countersink these, sorry, this side, countersink them, and screw them in, and hopefully it'll look like it was always meant to be like that. And before I put them in, I'll just put a bit of soap on these screws, an old trick my dad taught me. And that'll help them to go in better. So they're all countersink, and I've wound the screws in. So now we just place this in here, and it does have a bit of pressure against the baffle, which is a good thing. And just run the screws in. There we go. There we go, I'll even line up the screw heads. Now I'll do the same with the other side and we'll be done. Well, now the grill cloth's done, I guess the next thing is to fit this the dial. So it's just a case of fitting it in here, feeding this spindle through the hole in the woodwork and screwing it in. And I guess the trick is to get the screws to start. And the other top one. I'll just do these up loosely. So I'm going to have to get it all lined up, so it'll need some adjustment, I would imagine. I can see where the screws originally went, but I don't know if that will still line it up perfectly because it's been messed with. Although that does look pretty good like that. The lines all seem to line up. So now I can go around the front and put the other two screws in. Yes, that one's in. And that one's in. So with the dial in and looking quite good, I'd have to say, that leads me to the next challenge, and that is to replace this plastic sheet which covers the dial. This is the original one. It's about 0.7 or 8 mil thick, and I've tried to clean it up, but there's no chance of getting that back to clear again. So the solution I've come up with is this. I bought this roll of clear polycarbonate sheeting, 0.8 millimeter, and I'm going to try and cut it out of that. This has been kept in a roll, but I suspect that once I pull the plastic off it will spring out flat. I don't think it's going to sit into a curve easily. I did try experimentally cutting the corner off there with tin snips, and that seemed to be fairly successful. So I'm going to try and cut it out with those. But let's pull this plastic off and just see how much spring it's got in it. And I can see it's starting to spring out already. Yep. Of course I had to buy much more than I needed, but that's the way things are these days. So I'm going to trace out the shape of this with a Sharpie pen and just try and cut around it. So far so good. I peeled one side of the plastic off just to make sure there were no scratches or anything in it, and it looks good. As for curving it, I think I've been worrying too much. I noticed that on the underside of this Bakelite moulding there's a cutout, and it just slips into there and holds it in a curve. So I don't need to worry about it at all. I've been overthinking this ever since I've had this radio, thinking it's going to be a problem, and I should have looked more closely. It couldn't be more simple. So I'll peel the plastic off the other side. And fit that in here. Make sure it's centralized. And that will go over there like that. Yep, that should be fine. It does tend to make it spring out just a little bit, but I'm sure the screws will hold that in without any dramas. Okay, so let's see if we can screw this in. The original screws were a bit rusty, so I soaked them in vinegar for a while, and they've lost, I think they might have originally had a bronze finish, which they seem to have lost, but the vinegar has at least blackened them, so that'll probably be okay. I may need to clean out the holes. I think they've got a bit of lacquer in them. And again, lining up the screw heads so they're all horizontal. And that looks pretty good to me. Now we have this little piece to go over for the magic eye, and it just screws in through there. And for this we have these tiny screws. I hope that they will go back into their holes. I might need to perhaps clean those holes out. Now that's going in. I'll just run the screws in first. Yep, that's going in okay. And the other one here. Okay. First one, and I won't tighten that yet. The second one, yep, we have success. There we go. And again the screw head's horizontal. And now for the pièce de résistance, like my French accent. These volume and tone labels. I posted this radio on Facebook when I first bought it, and Kevin Chant contacted me and said that he could supply a couple. So I got back to him, and turns out he lives just down, well, a few minutes drive from my place. And so I went over to collect them, and he gave me these. They're very nice reproduction, and he also has an identical radio to this. The cabinet is original, the grill cloth's original, it's perfect. Beautiful radio. The only difference is apparently the magic eye was optional, and he has a blanking section there with no magic eye, which probably is a good thing considering the amount of dramas that they've caused. But these will go on there. Now the tricky thing, the originals were stapled on, and I can see the staple holes in the bottom there, but I don't have a stapler with the correct pitch, and I'm a bit reluctant to try and put a new staple in there. The timber's fairly thick. I don't want to damage either the labels or the cabinet. So I thought of panel pins, but I don't have any short enough to go in there. I'm not sure, but I thought what I'd do is I'll put them on with adhesive. I'll try some contact adhesive and see if that will hold them on. If not, I'll have to revert to the tacks. But the adhesive, if I put it around the knob hole, should be covered by the knob. Now to fit these gear drives, and I'll put the knob on this one. Alright, so it needs to go on there. And just tighten up the screws. Light in here is rather difficult. Now just a rough check. It lines up with the screwdriver there. Not lining up there. Maybe it needs to go further in. Can't go much further in. This might need to move along a little bit. I'm not sure if this is in its original position or not. Probably not. Okay, that will need to move along a little bit. Yeah, that will be about right there. I'll tighten it there, but I'll check it more accurately once I've got the chassis in. I mentioned before about going to the hardware store and not being able to get what you want. This is a case in point. The chassis only had one screw holding it in when I bought it. This is it, and it's a 3/16 I think, and a fine thread. Now I could buy 3/16 bolts, but they were a coarser thread than this. The closest thing I could get was these 5mm M5 bolts, and they won't fit in the chassis, of course. So then I bought a 5mm tap. So I'm going to run that through the threads in the bottom of the chassis, and I'm going to do the cheap and dirty thing and just run the tap through it and hopefully push the threads into enough shape to take the 5mm bolts. One down, 3 to go. There's a coil just in there. I have to make sure I don't touch it. I don't think I will. How's that coil? No worries. Plenty of room. Okay. So the time's finally come to put the chassis back in the cabinet. I've got all the knobs off it and the cord's tied up, and here we go. I'm lining the knobs up. There we go. Goes in like that. Let's look at the alignment on the front. They're both central, but a little bit low. I think the reason for that is that these little, I don't know what you call them, feet that the chassis is mounted on had a rubber cushion on them which has perished. I couldn't find any way of replacing it. So what I've done, anticipating this, is made up some little rubber blocks to go underneath them to lift the chassis back up to its original height, and also I guess to provide some insulation against vibration. Not that I think it probably needs it, but they have gone overboard with that, the way they mounted the speaker baffle with felt pads and everything. So I'll put them in and hopefully that will lift it up to the correct height. And these are what I've got, just blocks of rubber with a hole punched in them. I did go in search of rubber washers at the local hardware store, but of course they didn't have any. So I finally manoeuvred them into place That was a bit fiddly, but it seems to have done the trick. So just tightening the screws up from underneath. And there we go. Well, I guess the next thing to do is to fit the speaker, and I've taken it off its little stand on my bench top, and we'll just bolt it in first up. There we go. And gee, we've had some trouble with this speaker over the course of this restoration. It wasn't smoking, then it was the spider letting go and rattling. But it seems to be going well now, so that's a good thing, because I would have trouble replacing it. Now there's the globe. Which goes in here. And I'll just put it in there. Just putting the tuning drive in. And that's level horizontally. It seems to be pretty level that way. I think I'll have to tighten these nuts up to just tighten that felt pad. It's compressed a bit over the years. And that doesn't quite engage with the spindle, so I'll have to adjust it a bit. So I've finally got these shafts to line up here and here, and I put the chain around here. I've dialed that around a broadcast band, so I hope I can get the gears in the right position. But it looks as if I'll have to take this off again because I can't get the chain over the actual gear teeth. See, that's tight. I guess it should be tight. Okay, that needs to go further around. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, I want a couple more teeth on this, I think. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's about right. Okay, well I've finally got that sorted out. Moves through its travel quite easily. There's some surprising amount of tension on this chain, and that's achieved by bending the shaft that rotates the drum down a little bit. I guess that's the way it was designed. I've now got the band switch and the indicator on the dial to line up so that it's showing the correct indication on all bands. Okay, the next thing I guess is to attach the dial pointer, and that's really just a case of attaching this string to the pointer mechanism, but there's no real indication of where the left end of travel should be, so I'm going to turn it back to the fully closed position, and I'm thinking about here might be the end of travel. I'm not sure whether to take it right to the end or to the second line. I'll take it right to the end, I guess, and then I'll run it to the other end and see where it ends up. So it looks like I was wrong about the end of travel for this indicator. This first line here, which is the start of the actual part of the dial, is where it seems to want to line up. We take it to the other side of the scale and it lines up with that line on the other side. So I guess that's the way it's supposed to be. It does work nice and smoothly, I'd have to say, which is good. Okay, so the next thing is to put in the magic eye tube, and that goes with the little arrow pointing towards that dot. Yep, that should be right. And it sits in this clip here, which presumably directs it to the right position. That might be better like that. I'll move this back. I don't like that clip on the glass part of the tube very much either. I'd be happier if it was on the Bakelite base. That doesn't look bad. If I tilt it up a bit, we'll see how that looks. Let's put these knobs on. Those scratch plates still look nice, don't they? Now, how's this one go? Well, I guess that's it. There's nothing left to do but to switch it on and see how it sounds. Now that's 720 ABC, the local ABC, and I notice there it's coming just in above 700 on the dial. So that's pretty good. The other end of the dial, I was getting 6IX around here somewhere. I know it has moved since it was originally started, but you normally get it somewhere around there, and that was coming in about the right spot too, so that's promising. Well, it's been a long restoration, this one, with a few setbacks, but one thing about radio restoration, you're never on your own. I've had plenty of help and advice from people out there in comments. Manuel from Electronics Old and New, for instance, suggested I use a dummy antenna to do the alignment, and I did make one up and redo it, and I did get a bit of an improvement out of it. So that's great, thanks Manuel. I also must thank Blitz Ruhr for sending the valve, and David Tipton, that's for sending the 6E6 Magic Eye Tube, and Cavan Chant for these great volume and tone scratch plates. They look good. Sadly, I haven't been able to find out very much about this radio's history. I know it's lived most of its life in North Perth. I bought it from a gentleman called Mitch, who said his father had had it in the shed for a number of years. I later contacted his mum. Well, she actually contacted me, but she wasn't able to help me very much because she said the radio was given to them about 20 or 30 years ago by a very old lady who lived up the end of their street, and she didn't know very much about her. But I presume the radio has lived in that street in North Perth for, well, probably since it was new. So while working on this radio, I finally reached my goal of 1,000 subscribers, which is great. Thank you, each and every one of you. And if you like what I'm doing, please hit like and subscribe, and hopefully the channel will keep on growing. I've got quite a few projects stacked up and waiting to go. I'm not sure which one's going to be first, but in any case, thanks for watching, and I hope you can join me in the shed for the next one.
Forever Classic 6IX, latest news in 2 minutes' time at 5 o'clock.